Hello, everybody. This is Hondo Carpenter, the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast and your Sports Illustrated beat writer covering the Las Vegas Raiders. Here with my assistant beat writer from Sports Illustrated, the one and only, the great Zeke Trezevant. Zeke, good to have you here. We're both here at Raiders headquarters in what has been a very long day for day two.
Yes, sir. Very much so. Been a long day, but productive for everyone
Mhm.
involved. So glad to be here.
I thought it was a very good day for the Raiders. I thought there was an absolute home run. And then I felt like there was a guy that was a solid double. Um, if you're using baseball terms, I got that from one of my followers on Twitter. So I apologize. They said a single. I thought a double, but we're going to get more into it as it goes on. You and I have a lot to talk about. This is a complete recap of the Raiders draft so far. So let's just get right into it. Um, they stole Brock Bowers, and I was very clear. I would have, there were a few dogs in this draft, of which Brock Bowers was one, Talise Fuaga was another, Joel Alt was one, and but there wasn't a lot of them. There usually isn't because dogs are a rare breed. But they were able to get Bowers at 13, which was an absolute steal. And I know that some people didn't like it, but the reality was it was a great pick for value at 13. No one was willing to pay for number 13 at a value of what Bowers was. And so they got him. I liked it. I know we talked about it last time, but you didn't join me. What was your thoughts on the Bowers pick?
Yeah, in terms of Brock Bowers being the pick at 13, I'll be honest with you, I think it was unconventional, or in terms of what most people may have thought going into it. But at the same time, I think the draft picks in front of the Raiders fell a little bit differently than I think anybody could have really imagined after about the sixth or seventh pick in the draft. So then, if you're Tom Telesco, you're sitting there at 13, and yeah, you can draft the offensive lineman, and as good as he was in terms of the guy from Oregon State, Brock Bowers is just a better athlete. Like, it just is what it is. And when you look at the best player available at that time, it was Brock Bowers. And I don't see how you can ever be upset when you're adding a talent like Brock Bowers to a team that needs more talent on offense, specifically along their offensive line. Obviously, he's a pass catcher, but he's going to be blocking some as well. So it made sense on a lot of different levels, if you ask me.
I had several of my followers email me today and remind me that last year in a question and answer article after the draft, I don't remember if it was the first or second one, but it was right after the draft. Someone asked me if I had to guess who are the Raiders picking next year. I said Brock Powers because I knew how much the previous staff loved him, and they kept all of those scouts. And I tell you what, it was just a solid pick, a solid A plus. When you get a dog, you just don't complain about it. All right, so then they came into today. Now, this is a guy that you and I have talked about. I had told you that the Raiders really liked him. At the combine, we specifically had our own Carter Landis interview him. Um, we knew the Raiders were in on him. It was some of the information. It's why we tell everybody we do all of those draft profiles and we only profile the people that we know that the Raiders are interested in. And this is a kid who is mean, great kid. But when he gets on the football field, he's mean, he's nasty, he's a mauler. I have heard people equate him to Richie Incognito. One of my Twitter followers today kind of equated him to Gabe Jackson, which I hadn't thought about, but I think that's a very fair analysis. I know for a fact that several teams really liked him and had him rated as a first round grade, including the Raiders. But the way the draft fell, the Steelers weren't going to let him get past them. I think they're at 24 or 20, wherever they were at. But the way they fell, kind of like with the Raiders, a guy came they didn't think they had a shot, and he falls to the second. And unbelievable to me, the way some of these teams are drafting in this draft. The Raiders were able to pick him up at 44, and that's Jackson Powers Johnson, the guard for the Raiders. Now, you're sitting next to me. in the front row in the media room here at the Raiders. And I get a text. Now, we're not going to tell people who it is. You know who it is, but I another team F, you just got a mean, nasty, mauling SOB that we wanted. Great pick for you guys. Did I or did I not get that?
Yeah, you definitely did. I mean, no denying that. I saw it with my own eyes.
And but what a steal. Another A grade, A plus grade. You get a first round talent, second round, great grade, great player. He's gonna battle Cody Whitehair, but I fully expect him at some point next year to get in that starting lineup and not give him up. He is in the words of Pat McAfee, dog. Your thoughts on getting this young man? I mean, again, JPJ, what'd you think?
100%. I think between the size he brings, the mean streak that you mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, I believe they said he had a wrestling background as well. The versatility that he brings to the table. Obviously, when it comes to the offensive line, most teams like versatility along the offensive line. The Raiders love versatility along the offensive line. I think he checks all the boxes in terms of what the Raiders need. I also think it adds to what Telesco has done, right? It adds even more value to the Brock Bowers pick, right? Because you're just again you're
Mhm.
adding to the offensive line. I think when you look at what Jackson brings to the table, again that size, and I think again like you said, I think he's gonna at some point next year he's gonna be starting a decent amount of the games. I think so. I think that's the type of investment they just made in him. I think he fits what
Mhm.
the Raiders want to do. And then I also think if you think long term, what it allows them to do, it allows them to not necessarily have to lean on the quarterback play in the immediate. Run the ball, right? Run the ball. Lean on your receivers when you need to. On your Devontae's, obviously Jacoby, Brock Bowers, Michael Mayer, right? Throw the ball out of the backfield. But now you don't have to necessarily put so much on that quarterback, whether it's Gardner or whether it's Aiden. You can kind of let the running attack take care of things as well. So it just makes sense on so many different levels what the Raiders have done so far.
All right. Now we come to the third round, and they picked Delmar Glaze, the young man out of Maryland. And I'm going to be very honest. I thought he would end up going in the fourth round. That was kind of where I thought. So it's the first time we saw the Raiders maybe get a guy that didn't have a higher value or the same round value. But now that's a very um, that's a prognostication from me. You know this. The people aren't in the war room with us. I began to go frantically texting and emailing. I wanted to know from other people what they thought. I know what people thought about Delmar. I'm going to read you some of the things that I got from people, and then we're going to talk about because I asked um, Tom Telesco about it. Here's what I got from an AFC scout. The AFC scouts kid said to me, I really like Delmar. I think he's a solid guy that can become a very solid starter. But what popped for me was seeing him at the Senior Bowl against the best competition, just a couple of corrections from some NFL coaching, and he was exceptional. Prior to the Senior Bowl, we were thinking late 5, 6. On our board, he was an early 4. Okay. So they get him in the third round. You can call that a reach. Okay. Here's another scout. This is from an executive in the NFC. We like Delmar a lot. But I'll tell you, at the Senior Bowl, the kid just looked different with NFL coaching. No one got around him, gets his body in front of people. He would have trouble with a Max Crosby type rusher, but so does everybody else. But when they're not guys with the speed and athleticism of Max Crosby, once he gets his hands on you, you're going nowhere. Again, this same team had a fourth round grade on him. When you start to get into the third round, we've talked about you don't take risks in 1 and 2. You start getting in the third round. If you think, okay, there's been a huge run. And so we got one tackle left that we like. So we may have a fourth round grade, but it's a third. We're in the middle of the third. It's not a dumb pick like it would be from first to 2. And he was that last guy on their board that they felt like could come in and be a impact guy. So you can call it a reach. That would certainly, I don't have a problem with that. But when you saw this kid with big time NFL coaching, he got better against big time NFL prospects. I'd really love to hear your thoughts on Delmar.
Yeah, yeah. So I think in terms of whether or not there's a reach, I think it's all it's relative, and I think it circles back to the word value, right? And I think you look at the Raiders; they got such great value on their first two picks that they could afford to reach a little bit in the third round. I'd also say this though, you got to look at in terms of their needs. Value is relative to the team that is drafting in their specific needs. There was no way the Raiders could come out of this draft without a sizable offensive line haul, which means they needed to go get an additional offensive lineman in the third round. They couldn't wait till the fourth round, or else it would have undone all the work they had done in the first two rounds. So did they reach a little bit? I think technically, but I don't think it was a reach for their needs, for what they needed at this specific time. I think it was a perfect draft pick for them.
Mm-hmm.
Stalwart is what it came to my mind when I saw the highlights of him. Like you said, again, I didn't talk to a scout by any means, but just looking at the highlights, you weren't getting past that man at all. Like you
Mm-hmm.
just, like I always like to joke with you a little bit about, like, as a lover of the defensive line, okay, you're not getting past that man. Okay, you weren't getting past him at all, and the tape shows that. But I think to your point, a bigger thing in terms of the Senior Bowl, if you will, he's coachable, right? If you're drafting him in the third round, if you're going to reach, you better get a guy that can learn and learn quickly and make the changes that need to be made. And that's what he displayed when it came to when he finally got with NFL coaches around him. So I think all the way around picks, first round, second round, third round, the Raiders had a very clear and concise plan to improve the offensive line, and they did it.
Now, I had been told he had two surgeries on one knee, but after he was picked, I saw some reporting that he'd hurt both knees. I didn't believe that to be accurate. And so you were on the call with me. I asked him. He said it was just one knee. Now, what I was told that no one had any concerns about it because it was one surgery and then it still hurt because there was some scar tissue. They went in a second time and cleaned it up. So there was no concerns on anyone's medical that I checked with. So there was no there. And again, I want to go back because I think this is important and I want to make sure that we're addressing this with our listeners. If you know you need a right tackle and you got a group of them that you think, okay, if we come away with one of these guys, we're happy. And you got grades all the way into the fourth round and you're sitting there at pick 77 and there's only one left, but you still think, hey, he's a worthy pick. To me, I think I'm not against anyone that calls it a reach, but it makes complete sense to me in the amount of teams that liked him. I can tell you that Seattle really liked him. There was interest with Seattle with him. There was also interest with Buffalo with him. And the other thing that I thought was and I'm sure there were others, but I know there was interest with Carolina with him. So that's the only three I know of, but there are others. And again, the coachability, he's not getting the offensive line coaching at Maryland that he's going to get in the NFL, let alone with the Raiders and Coach Greg. And so when you see that he can take the coaching. And then at the Senior Bowl, Tom Telesco, you heard me ask him tonight. If you didn't get to see the videos, ladies and gentlemen, of Tom's press conference tonight, I encourage you to go watch it. We have it up. But I asked Tom about that and him popping at the Senior Bowl. And he said, yeah, he was really good. And the value of the Senior Bowl is every single player there is going to be in the NFL. And so and he's getting NFL coaching for the first time. Again, um, I I don't have an issue with the pick. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I think, wow, it was a home run. Um, like I thought about Bowers or JPJ, but I certainly think it was a good one. And if you go back to baseball, when are you ever going to get mad at somebody for hitting a double?
Exactly. Right. He took, in terms of when I say Telesco, he took what the team needed. right? And again,
Hmm.
I'm with you, right? It wasn't necessarily a home run, but I challenge anyone that thinks it was a crazy reach by any means. Who else could the Raiders have drafted at that position that would have helped them as much as DJ is going to help them in the immediate, right? Because at the end of the day,
Absolutely.
if you looked at the Raiders depth chart in terms of their offensive line, anytime before the last 2 or 3 hours, it was very empty, right? In terms of the
Hmm.
offensive line, very, very empty. Whether you're looking at starters or whether you're looking at the players behind the starters, the backups, very, very empty. So again, I really don't think necessarily it was a home run, but it was exactly what they needed. And sometimes in the draft, that's just what you need to do. You need to connect where you need to connect and execute where you need to execute. And that's what they did.
One of the things about drafting, and I love something that Tom Telesco told you and I tonight, these you just can't go and hit a vending machine and get a 6'9", 350-pound athletic tackle. So that's not reality. But you can get a guy who's 6'4.5" with really good arms, with long legs, great core. He's 315 pounds. He's extremely athletic, which is what they want with their zone running scheme. So he fits that perfect. He's played left and right, but really tremendous at right tackle. It's extremely, I think he's a born right tackle. I don't see him as a left tackle. I know Telesco said he could flex if he had to, and I agree with that. But a flex is not a solution; it's a temporary patch. So I think he's a right tackle. I think again, sometimes the best picks are the safest picks. Now
Agreed.
let's talk about that for a minute because there's some players on this board that still have third round grades. So somebody may say, well, so if you take a fourth round grade guy, you're not drafting best available. And remember what I have been hammering on this podcast for a long time. It's best available at a place that they can be used. So Bowers, did they have to have a tight end? No. But best available at a position that they could use him. So it was fine. If it was a left tackle, he wouldn't have got picked. And I'd like you to elaborate on that.
No, like I completely agree. I mean, you got to think about it. They're set at left tackle, right? So had a talented left tackle, a left tackle that is as talented as Brock Bowers had been there, they wouldn't have taken him because again, they didn't need a left tackle. But at the same time, the value they got for a player like Brock Bowers, you had to kind of take that player there because you know you can use him at some point. I'd also say this because as we're talking about the offensive line, the third and fourth round, et cetera. I think what a lot of people fail to realize is that sometimes, and I think specifically here with the Raiders, they're thinking, hey, this guy may have been a fourth round grade before our coaching staff got a hold of him. Right. So they're looking at it like, hey, we're showing a lot of confidence in our coaches that we hired. And we think we can take that fourth round grade and make him a third or what would have been a second rounder by the time he spends a season or two or three in our program with our coaches in this situation here in Las Vegas. So I think that plays a large part into why DJ got drafted, where he got drafted as well.
100% agree. That's great analysis on your part, Zeke. All right. So let's go now to quarterback. And actually, before we do, I want to address one other issue. I want to give you a lot of credit. Last week on the podcast, our last podcast before the draft, you talked about the Raiders are telegraphing they're not going for a quarterback.
Mhm.
They're telegraphing offensive line, which is what we've been trying to tell people. They have reiterated us. I think sometimes fans are so used to disingenuine talk from leaders that they just assume it's all a lie. Well, but NFL Network or ESPN or Sports Illustrated or whomever says this is a need, they must be lying. This is not Telesco and AP. They're not liars. They're not guys that are out there trying to deceive. They're very open books. And you're right. They said we want to build, we want to go vertical, we want to throw the ball, but we also want to attack with the running game and all three picks on the offensive line. You called it. You were correct. I want to give you your props.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that. And to your point, right? A lot of times when coaches and GMs and people in the front office get up and speak, especially leading up to the draft, there is a lot of coach speak. There is a lot of smoke screens thrown out there. But what I would say is this: is not only did AP and Telesco flat out just come out and tell you, their moves, the moves that they made said all the things that they didn't, even though they said it, right? Their moves in terms
Mhm.
of letting go of Fluker, even though Fluker was not going to be a starter, don't get me wrong, it just left a huge hole on the offensive line. Not re-signing Greg Van Roten. There's just a couple of different moves they made or did not make on the offensive line that said, hey, there's no way they could have started the season with a quarterback competition, three
Mhm.
running backs back there, and had the holes that they had on. There was just no way. There was no way they had to address the offensive line in a major way. Now, did any of us really see the Brock Bowers pick coming? No. But at the same time, he does still add to your offensive line. And then they spent the next two picks on sizable offensive linemen. All the signs were there. Sometimes you got to kind of ignore what you may or may not hear from a coach or a GM and just look at the moves that they made. Telesco has had a history of making sensible moves, right? So why would that change here now that he's with the Raiders, right? You might not agree with all of the moves, but they usually make sense if you look at it. So the moves he was making up until the draft screamed we're addressing the offensive line in the draft.
And one of the things that has impressed me about um, Antonio Pierce, and you heard me ask this to Telesco tonight. A lot of coaches come in if they're an offensive coach or a defensive coach and then get their first head coaching job. That's where all their mindset is. And AP has loved every pick that's been made. There's been no tension. There's been no stress. It's been he gets it. He understands it. And I asked AP, I mean, Telesco, are you a little bit surprised? And I think AP in his ability to step back now from being a defensive coach and look at the team and it in totality as a CEO has been very impressive to me.
I agree with you, and I think honestly, just on a bigger scale, I think that's where his playing days come up into part in this, right?
Mhm.
And to kind of build on what you just said, even last season, think about how well he handled Aiden, right? That's an offensive guy, that's a rookie quarterback. He handled that. He handled the young quarterback better than what you would have expected a defensive minded interim head coach to handle it. And that just kind of showed you that it didn't matter whether you played offense, defense, special teams, how long you've been in the league. None of that mattered. AP knew how to connect with his team. And then how he's been kind of displaying that energy throughout the draft. He knows how to connect with the organization. And I think it's genuine. I think it's real. And you see it around around the locker room, around the organization. He knows how to connect with anybody and everyone. And I think it goes a long way.
One of the things they're trying to do, and they've talked about it, is they're looking for Max Crosby's. And let's face it, he's a unicorn. You're not going to go get a ton of them. They were able to get one in Christian Wilkins. They were able to get one in Spillane. But guys who love the game, who are totally committed to it, hard workers, guys that are going to just bust button practice. They're not going to be looking to take a rep off. Their first three picks are all offensive linemen, and their first three picks are all, the Max Crosby mentality. I'd like your opinion on that.
Intangibles. I mean, that's the word that comes to mind, right? And Telesco kind of spoke about it a little bit ago, right? There are plenty of talented guys they have the size that you want, they have the speed that you want, all that, but they don't have the things that you can't coach, right? The things that Max brings to the table, the motor, the desire to be great. I mean, we've all seen it, right? We've seen some great athletes come through the NFL and they just didn't even like to play football. Right? They had the great athleticism, but they didn't care about the game. They didn't love the game. They didn't care to get better, right? And I think that's something that throughout this entire draft process, Telesco and the Raiders have made it a point to find because you got to think, Max Crosby wasn't Max Crosby when he got into the league, when he got drafted, right? Max Crosby has grown into that, but he had the signs there before he got drafted that he could be what he's become. And that's what Telesco and the Raiders are looking for. And I think they found that through the first three draft picks.
All right, let's turn to quarterback. I know there's a lot of people who, and I think people need to relax. I fully expect whether it's through the draft or a UDFA, there's going to be a rookie quarterback. But you're looking at that draft board, and there's several quarterbacks. There's Jordan, the kid from Florida State. There's the young man from Kentucky. I think his last name's Courtney. I just don't have it in my notes. I apologize about that. There's Spencer Rattler, who we have mocked many times going to the Raiders. They know, okay, there's enough guys there. We'll get a quarter. And there's also some really good ones. that they can get in the fifth, sixth, seventh, or even as a UDFA, depending on how the board falls out. So they're not worried about that. AP has made it clear during the season, after the season, combine, owners' meetings. Yes, we want a competition at quarterback, but whoever gets it's going to have to beat out Aiden. That's my guy. And I'm surprised that people are surprised. There was a reason in our mock drafts I kept mocking them getting a quarterback third, fourth, fifth round because we know what we were being told. I think the job is completely up in the air. I think Aiden is QB1 right now. Gardner's going to get every shot to beat him. He's going to have every shot to defend him. Don't forget Anthony Brown and whoever the rookie is. But I think people are underestimating the value they put on Aiden and the value that they put in Gardner. I would love your opinion on that.
Yeah, you hit it right on the head, right? The value that the Raiders have put in both quarterbacks, not just Aiden, not just Gardner. We can start with Gardner. I mean, again, I'm a firm believer that that game last season had a lot to do with why Gardner is a Raider right now. I truly believe that has a lot to do with it. And I think they saw starting potential. We've all seen starting potential in Gardner throughout his career. But more than anything, he has the potential to be a very capable backup, which the Raiders did not have last year. And I think that he kind of fits that mold there for what the Raiders need their leadership as well in terms of Gardner. In terms of Aiden, I think there's a connection between Aiden and AP just because they were both put into such a unique situation last year. And AP got to see how well Aiden handled the situation. They were in the foxhole together, and it was a foxhole. For those of you know that don't know what a foxhole is, they were in the foxhole together, and they played and they did it, extremely well. I think AP is looking at it like Aiden is his guy. Aiden has proven enough of himself to earn a chance this season to win the starting position. And I also think AP, unlike maybe the previous coaching staff, is not gonna undermine or try to even make it seem like he's gonna potentially undermine Aiden. He's putting him in a position to win all the way around, and now it's just time for Aiden to go take it over.
I want to go back to the quarterbacks for a minute. Devin Leary is out there, the young man from Kentucky, and I think his stats are deceptive. I really like him a lot. I know the Raiders like him a lot. Spencer Rattler's out there. Again, this is a guy I know they really like him too. And this is a guy, and Jordan Travis, that's the young man's name. But I want to remind you about Kedon Slovis. This is a kid out of, I think he is. He's out of BYU. This kid's the real deal. And he's got to develop. He's not ready. But I don't think any of them are ready. I don't think Jordan Travis is ready. I think maybe the kid from Kentucky would be the most ready, maybe Spencer. But again, those are some names people need to keep out there. I'm going to read you something. Okay. I'm going to give you some stats. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Passing TDs. This is the last 3 seasons, 58. Interceptions, 39. Passer rating, 85. Games played, 50. Does that sound like a pretty good quarterback in the last 3 years?
It does.
Okay. That's Trevor Lawrence,
Mm-hmm.
who's sitting on the precipice of probably a $200 million extension. Okay. Would Raider Nation have been happy if the Raiders would have traded their number one draft pick for Trevor Lawrence?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in those same 3 years, let me give you Gardner Minshew's stats. Ready? 58 passing TDs for Trevor Lawrence, 59 for Gardner, 39 interceptions for Lawrence, 24 for Gardner. Passer rating for Travis, 85. I mean, for Trevor. Passer rating for Gardner, 90. Games played, 50 for Trevor. Games played, 49 for Gardner. It's amazing when you take away somebody's picture or the height, and the numbers don't lie, do they? They tell a
No,
story, don't they, my friend?
the numbers always tell a story. Is you just got to figure out what that story is. And again, we go back, we keep circling back to the word value, 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 value. You can't
Mhm.
overestimate how big of a deal that is, especially to Telesco. Some GMs don't care about value, they don't. But
Mhm.
here, that is a big deal in terms of for the Raiders. And Gardner brings a huge, huge value to the Raiders for so many different reasons. From the fact that he's on an affordable contract, if he is needed to be a starter at any point of the season for the Raiders this year, they're in relatively good hands, right? You don't have to at least scratch your head and wonder what's going to happen when he walks out on the field. Is this going to be a bad pass? Is it going to be a fumble? Is he going to turn it over? You don't have to worry about certain things with Gardner being in the game. So I think the value he brings to the Raiders honestly might be more than might even show up on the stat sheet, really, because of what he brings to the table for the team.
Okay, I want to address something that I think is very important, and I'm done addressing critics. We're moving forward. By the way, I want to give a shout out to one of our listeners on who listens every day, and I want to make sure I get his name right. Ty Vonti. So Ty Vonti, thank you. I'm not going to address critics, but I love it when we get good email and responses from our listener. And we get thousands of emails and responses from them because Raider Nation's the best. But I got an email from a guy who was not being critical of Tom, but he said, I'm nervous because he's making safe picks. There's no gambling. I want to explain something. You and I live in Vegas. The casinos love to show us some lady gets on a Greyhound bus with $50 in her pocket, comes to Vegas, puts it in a slot machine, and wins 2 million bucks. Okay. But for every one of those are tens of thousands who then don't have the money to get back home on the Greyhound bus when they lose. And fans love the gamble, but gamblers, for the most part, and yes, you can find an exception, but out of 100 gamblers, you're only going to have a couple that get wealthy from gambling. The successful ones don't gamble. We talked about this on a podcast a couple weeks ago, how you're going to see the Raiders move from gamblers to investors. I love Tom Telesco is approaching this exactly how the best teams do. I can't gamble in the draft. I got to make sure I'm getting quality players because I need a roster. See, everybody thinks about my best player. He's thinking about all 53 and the practice squad. I love the fact that he's not gambling. The Raiders have gambled too much. It's why they've wallowed in mediocrity for 2 decades. What say you?
Listen, you took the words out of my mouth. I was going to say, haven't the Raiders gambled enough over the last few years? Like, aren't you tired of that? Like, what do you mean they haven't taken enough gambles? Like, that's all they've been doing is gambling. And when they gamble, the fan base is upset too, right? When they gamble, it's, oh, why did that guy get picked? And then when they don't gamble, you're upset. It's like it's a no-win situation. But yeah, I think you hit it right on that head. You got to take the safe pick, right? They were rumored to want the draft or trade up in the draft in the first round, and that would have been a huge gamble. And it's like, this is what I'll say. I think with Telesco, he's not only thinking about the 53 men on the roster and the practice squad, but he's also thinking about the future. He's thinking about year 2, year 3, year 5. And guess what?
Mhm.
Year 2, year 3, year 5 doesn't happen if you've traded away all your picks to draft up, to trade up to the number 2, number 3 pick, right? So he's thinking long term. He's thinking, beyond himself and what the team needs right now. He's thinking about, hey, what's going to help this team down the road, and even down to the pick for DJ tonight in terms of the offensive lineman. That's a future pick. That's a helping the team out down the road pick, right? So he's done a great job so far of making sure that he takes the safe route, which, like we've said, a lot of times that's the best way to go. And I'd also say this: the Raiders are close enough to being where they want to be that they don't need to take risks, right? They're so close that had they taken the wrong risk, it would have undone a lot of the work that they've done over the last couple of years, especially the last 12 months. So they're too close to take a risk, a major risk, and lose, right? Take the safe bet, plug the small holes that you need to plug, and move forward like that. So I think some of the moves might not make sense right now, what Telesco's doing, but give it 2 years, give it 3 years, and you're going to look back and say, you know what? It makes sense.
Boy, I don't know who I know there is a group they don't make sense to, but it doesn't make sense to me how it doesn't make sense to them. Okay, We're going to turn our attention to tomorrow, but before we do, I want to ask you this. I grade the Raiders draft right now as an A. I've got an A plus on Bowers, an A plus on JBJ and JPJ, and I've got a solid B, probably a B minus, maybe a C plus, somewhere in there on Delmar. But talking to everybody that I talked to, and he's the last available, yeah, I'd give it a B minus. But the fact that he hasn't played dumb, the fact that he's not trying to win press conferences, he's trying to win games, which is huge. To me, that tells the story. I'm giving this Raiders right now an a solid A, not a minus, a solid A. They're better today. Your thoughts?
Quick answer in terms of the grade I was getting, the first letter that came to my mind was a B plus, right? I think in the totality of all that they've done with the 3 picks, I'm not sure how they could have gotten better as a team than what they've done in the first 3 picks of the draft, right? Altogether, because offensive line was by far the major need on the team, and they've thoroughly addressed that position, or the offensive line unit. So altogether, B plus. I'm curious to see what they do in the further rounds of the draft, and that might get me from a B plus to an A. I honestly think in terms of offense right now in the draft, I think they're relatively set. I think going forward into the future rounds, it's probably time to go add to that cornerback position, to that safety position, to that linebacker position, and then we can kind of grade it a little bit more from there. But what they've done so far, man, I'm impressed, and I'm excited to see how it pans out on the field, which is all that really matters, right? It looks good on paper. Got to see how it translates to the field.
Yeah, I think they could use a wide receiver, but that would be it. All right, let's talk about tomorrow. You expect rounds 1 through 5 to make your ball club. 6 and 7, you expect to make your practice squad. If they're able to make the roster, that is a bigger plus. That means you overdrafted and did very well. So you're looking tomorrow for 3 more guys to make the roster, 2 to make the practice squad and develop. As it unfolds tomorrow, what we're going to learn is this scouting department is phenomenal. Champ Kelly was charged by Dave Ziegler to redo it, and Champ Kelly did a heck of a job. And Tom Telesco, every time off the record, on the record, has bragged about the scouting department. Can't believe how well it's put together. You're going to continue to see tomorrow good teams make progress on day 3. I fully expect the Raiders to have a very good day tomorrow.
With that said, quick shout out to Champ Kelly. We know he's working in the background, and I feel like he's one of those guys that's putting a lot of the information on the table that's kind of going into these picks. He just may not be getting a whole lot of the attention that comes with it. So, Champ Kelly, we see you. Good job on what you've done. But in terms of what the Raiders are about to do, I think they're gonna impress. I really do, because again, they've already taken the first 2-3 rounds, and they've addressed the biggest need on their team by far. Now, like you said, now we get to see how well they've drafted past the big names, past the needs that everybody knows they need. And I think that's what we're going to see, how far along the line how far along they are in terms of a scouting department, depending on the picks they make tomorrow.
Great. Now, everybody remember, follow us at si.com/NFL/Raiders for all of we're putting out 11, 12 articles a day. We are pumping this thing with information. Nobody's covering it like we are. Shout out to all of our team: Michael France, Braden Reedy, Carter Landis, Aiden Champion, who's in Michigan covering there, and you and I are here in Las Vegas. We're hitting it hard, and we appreciate all of our staff. Not only Zeke, but I love Zeke. You guys know that, but we love all of our staff. Great group of guys working very, very hard. So we're very excited about that and what's happening. And we're going to have you plenty more coverage tomorrow. Lots of video. We're going to be talking with AP tomorrow, Tom Telesco tomorrow, my draft recap next week. Zeke will join me as we reflect back on the draft. So a lot of great stuff coming. Zeke, tell them your Twitter handle.
Yes, EZ, as in short for Ezekiel. So EZ, and then my last name Trezevant. So EZT as in Tom, REZ as in zebra, E V as in Victor, A as in Apple, N as in Nancy, T as in Tom.
All right, that's the great Zeke Trezevant. Remember, follow me on IG when you go to Hondo SR, and on X, formerly known as Twitter, when you go to @Hondo Carpenter. Thanks for joining us here from Raider headquarters. This is our complete day 2 of the NFL draft recap. We'll be back here tomorrow with plenty more. Thanks, everybody.